Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvisi Sasanyavadi Paschanjade Satarine Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaur Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. In the evening sessions, we've been reading from Chaitanya Bhagavat in honor of Lord Chaitanya's appearance day, although it's after his appearance day. Plan to continue for this weekend on Chaitanya Bhagavat, where we ended yesterday, not yesterday, day before yesterday, was chapter 16 of Adikanda. Lord Chaitanya, the time of his life is he's quite young, and his first marriage has happened. Lakshmi Priya was his first wife, and we heard that the final chapter we heard was about the defeat of Keshava, Kashmiri, or the traveling scholar from Kashmir, who was going all over the country, defeating everybody in challenging debates. And then he came to Navadvip. And Nimai Pandit very expertly, without embarrassing him, he didn't exactly defeat him, but the goddess Saraswati, who he was a worshipper of, had him become silent, or rather than her gifting his tongue with powerful speech, he was unable to speak. So we remember hearing that. Saraswati that evening appeared in a dream, telling him that my worshipable Lord is the person who defeated you, and revealed to him, said, don't disclose this to anyone or you're finished. But he's the personality you've guided with, in very nice terms. He made that clear. And you've just offended the Supreme Lord. So you go fall at his feet and beg his forgiveness, become his follower. So that happened. And the Digvijay left town. And everyone started celebrating the gifted Nimai, because this person, the traveling Pandit, had defeated scholars all over the country, in various places, of seats of high learning, and so on. And then there was some things that ended the chapter, but there was a question, and I wanted to report back the findings from the research. It was actually Snehavali that found all this. According to Navadvip Dham Mahatmya, which is a book written by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, describing the Mahatmya, or the glories of Navadvip. He, in one section, describes that in his previous life, Keshava Kashmiri was Nimbarkacharya. Nimbarkacharya is the head of one of the four principal sampradayas. It actually comes the other way. Nimbarkacharya sees Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Navadvip. He was on pilgrimage in Navadvip, and Lord Chaitanya appeared before him, and many things happened. Many things happened. Because the Nimbarkacharya heads are the four Kumaras, and the four Kumaras showed themselves to Nimbarkacharya, and then in Navadvip they manifested themselves as Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the source of all avatars, and the four Kumaras are empowered incarnations. Empowered incarnations means they're living entities gifted with the power of the Supreme Lord. The four Kumaras are gifted with the power of Gyan Shakti. The Supreme Lord has unlimited potencies, and knowledge potency is amongst them, and the fullness of that, the Lord's knowledge potency, is invested in the four Kumaras. The four Kumaras are the heads of the sampradaya in which Nimbarkacharya appeared. And when he was in Navadvip, the four Kumaras showed themselves and then transformed themselves into Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, and explained in a future life, you will appear as Keshava Kashmiri. And the events will be like this, and the events will be like that. And in Antya Lila of Chaitanya Charitamrita, there's further explanation that this Keshava Kashmiri, when he left Navadvip, after his interaction with Lord Nimai Pandit, he became an initiated follower of Nimbarka Sampradaya, and as a great scholar, he wrote commentary on Nimbarkacharya's Vedanta Sutra. There's a certain name, and he wrote a commentary on that commentary. And he wrote other texts which are referred to in Hari Bhakti Vilas. Hari Bhakti Vilas was written by Sanatana Goswami, and it's a how-to manual on anything to do with Vaishnavism. And Nimbarkacharya certainly teaches things that the line of Lord Chaitanya emphasizes. Specifically, they emphasize the importance of worship of Radharani and the most exalted position amongst the rasas of the gopis. The Nimbarkacharya line emphasizes those two things, which Mahaprabhu's teachings also emphasize. So, in the writings of Hari Bhakti Vilas, Keshava Kashmiri became an author of some literature which Sanatana Goswami makes references from, because he was elder. And by age, Sanatana Goswami was younger. So Keshava Kashmiri's writings made their way into Sanatana Goswami's writings by a reference to them. Made their way. So that's a little background on where we were last time. The chapters that follow, because when we read the Keshava Kashmiri chapter, Mahaprabhu was already, or Nimai Pandit is already married. He's married to Lakshmi Priya. And he then, as a young traveling student, he makes a tour of East Bengal. Many other things are taught in the subsequent chapter. But in the course of a prominent thing that happens in the course of his travel in East Bengal is, out of separation from him, Lakshmi Priya is seated by the side of the Ganges, and in a trance of meditation, she leaves her body in the mood of separation from him. And when he returns, he comes to hear that she has departed. And the author, Vrindavan Das, says he acted as if he was a worldly person, grieving, and then he consoled his mother by transcendental talks about the temporary nature of things of this world. That's a little quick mini summary of the next chapter. The chapter that follows is his mother being very anxious for her son. She wishes to have him accept a second wife. There's a detailed arrangement, a marriage arrangement, a big shebang for a wedding with all kinds of details. We don't hear those kind of details with the first marriage, but very, very elaborate description of his marriage. And then some glories of Haridas Thakur, because he comes into the picture again. He was already present. Haridas Thakur was already present because he and Advaita Acharya were involved in inviting him to come, petitioning the personality of Godhead for him to come, to appear in this world. So the section I'd like to read now is his initiation. And the visit, the occasion is he's visiting Gaya on the particular time of the year that is appropriate to offer Shraddha to one's forefathers in Gaya. So he readies himself to go to Gaya. His students go with him. There's a pastime that's very much like the pastime of Krishna having a headache. Krishna doesn't have a headache, but he has the pastime of having a headache. And when he has the pastime of having a headache, it's the dust of the feet of the gopis that cures his headache. And they're fine with, if it means we go to hell for taking the dust from our feet, no problem, but Krishna's headache should end. And that's a glorified sacrifice and submission of the gopis. In this case, it's different, but it's similar. He has a fever, and the doctors try this and that and the other thing, and nothing reduces the fever. And so the plan is, there's only one thing, water that's washed the feet of brahmanas. The commentator, I'm going to start reading shortly, but the commentary says it's the step in the direction of becoming a Vaishnav, because prior he was a scholar, but he wasn't a Vaishnav. He was behaving as if he was not a Vaishnav. Although the preliminary step, maybe you remember seeing from that slide presentation of the pastimes of Lord Chaitanya, it shows Ishwar Puri coming to visit Navadvip. Remember the picture, standing by the side of Ishwar Puri, who became his spiritual master as Gadadhar. Gadadhar, quite different than Nimai Pandit. He was very renounced, lifelong celibate, and he was attracted to devotional life from childhood, those two. And so as much as Gadadhar was naturally attracted to Nimai, Nimai would always taunt him and tease him and debate with him and do the scholarly thing. And so he couldn't not be with him and couldn't be with him. He was very attracted, naturally, spiritually attracted to his association But Gadadhar Pandit found it very difficult to be with Nimai because he'd always do his scholarly challenging, teasing, feistiness, arrogance, and all those other things that Lord Chaitanya was showing as a scholar. But when Ishwara Puri came, there was a very, very natural affinity between Gadadhar Pandit and Ishwara Puri. And when Ishwara Puri came to Navadvip, because he was visiting holy places, he was not exhibiting his greatness, but he had written a book about Krishna's pastimes. You remember that painting? Nimai is at his feet, touching his feet, respecting him in a proper way. So he did service. He invited him to come to receive his meal from Sachi. When he was having his meal with Sachi, he said, "I hear you're a nice scholar. I make some request of service from you. You can hear my readings, and if you find some error, you can indicate." It's kind of like proofreading. So he did some service. He accepted defeat at Ishwara Puri's hand. So he's already had a relationship with Ishwara Puri. And lo and behold, when he gets to Gaya, Ishwara Puri is there. So when he's in Puri, he accepts Diksha from Ishwara Puri, and everything changes. His Leela as the super scholar is over, and the Leela as a Vaishnava is over, and that in Chaitanya Bhagavat marks the end. There's breaking points in his Leela. This is one of those breaking points. That before he becomes a devotee, and then he becomes a devotee. So this is the becomes a devotee chapter. The final chapter of Adikanda is chapter 17. The Lord travels to Gaya. Here's a short paragraph saying what's in the chapter, and then I'll just read. It's not a long chapter. I'll just read the chapter. This chapter describes Sri Gaurasundar's visit to Gaya via Mandara and Pum, his meeting with Ishwara Puri at Gaya, his bestowing mercy on Ishwara Puri on the pretext of accepting initiation, his manifestation of himself, his attempts to go to Mathura while being maddened in separation from Krishna, his return home to Navadvip Mayapur after hearing a voice from the sky on the way, and the conclusion of Adikanda. Text 1. All glories to the Supreme Lord, Shri Gaurasundara. All glories to Nityananda's beloved Lord, who possesses an eternal body. All glories to the Lord, who is the life and wealth of all the Vaishnavas. O Lord, please deliver the living entities by your merciful glance. O brothers, listen carefully to the topics of Adikanda, which describe the Lord's journey to Gaya. In this way, in this way, the Lord of Vaikuntha resided at Navadvip as the crest jewel of teachers. As the number of atheists increased in Navadvip, it became difficult to even hear the mention of devotional service. The devotees were distressed to see that people were simply attached to illusory pleasures. Although the Lord was absorbed in studying and teaching, he noted the devotees' distress. He heard how the miscreants were constantly blaspheming the Vaishnavas. The Lord thus desired to manifest himself, but he thought he should first visit Gaya. The supremely independent Lord Gaurasundar desired to see the holy place of Gaya. After performing the Shraddha ceremony for his father, according to scriptural injunctions, the Lord departed for Gaya with many of his students. The Lord first took permission from his mother, Sachi, and happily left to see Gaya. As the Lord passed through the various towns and villages on the way to Gaya, they were all turned into holy places by the touch of his lotus feet. The Lord and his students conversed, joked, and discussed various religious topics, and after a few days they arrived at Mandara Hill. The Lord first saw the deity Madhusudana at the top of the hill, and he then wandered about the hill according to his desire. When traveling like this one day, the Lord manifested a fever. Now, again, he has no material body. It's already described in the glorification verses purposely. He has a spiritual form, all spiritual form. So the headache is what material forms get, and fever is what material forms get, but he manifested a pastime. In order to instruct people, the Lord of Vaikuntha displayed the fever like an ordinary person. When the Lord manifested his fever halfway to Gaya, the hearts of his students were filled with anxiety. They tried to cure him by various remedies, but by the desire of the Lord, his fever did not subside. Then the Lord prescribed his own medicine. If I drink the water that has washed the feet of a Brahmana, my suffering will be relieved. And there's a nice purport. It's the consequence for the one who takes the water of a Brahmana is they're destined for hell. What it says here. The Lord then drank the water that had washed the feet of the Brahmanas in order to reveal its glories. As soon as the Lord drank that water, his fever subsided, and he felt relief. According to the Vedas and Puranas, it is the nature of the Supreme Lord to drink the water that has washed the feet of a Brahmana. And a 4-page purport. The Lord desires to be the servant of anyone who always desires to be a servant of the Lord. And there's a 6-page purport for that one. Maybe we'll come back and read some of that. The Lord is therefore known as Sevaka Vatsala, or he who is favorably inclined to his servants. He accepts defeat in order to increase his devotees' glories. The devotees have only the Lord as their protector, and therefore, how can they give up his lotus feet? After being cured of his fever in this way, the Lord and his students came to the bank of the holy Puna river. After taking bath and offering oblations to his forefathers, Sri Sachinandana entered Gaya. As the Lord entered Gaya, the king of all holy places, he offered obeisances with folded hands. Thereafter, the Lord came through Brahmakund, wherein he took bath and offered oblations to his forefathers. The Lord then entered Chakra Veda and quickly went to see the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. That's a very special place. It's like a deity showing on a horizontal plane the impressions of the feet of Lord Vishnu. And they're constantly brahmanas on all sides offering prayers to the lotus feet of Vishnu. So he went and saw, and he offered his respects to the lotus feet of Vishnu. Countless flower garlands were stacked like a temple dome on Lord Vishnu's footprints, which were surrounded on all sides by brahmanas. Unlimited sandalwood paste, flowers, incense, and cloth had been offered at the lotus feet of the Lord. The brahmanas appeared like divine beings as they described the glories of the Lord's lotus feet. Quote, Lord Shiva accepted these same lotus feet in his heart, and these same lotus feet are constantly served by Lakshmi. These lotus feet were placed on the head of Bali Maharaj. Oh, fortunate souls, now see those same lotus feet here. One who meditates on these lotus feet for even a moment never comes under the jurisdiction of Yamaraj. These lotus feet are rarely attained by even the best of yogis. Oh, fortunate souls, now see those same lotus feet here. The Ganges emanated from these lotus feet, and the servants of the Lord constantly keep these lotus feet in their hearts. These lotus feet are most enchanting on the bed of Ananta. Oh, fortunate souls, now see those same lotus feet here. And so forth. Hearing the glories of the Lord's lotus feet from the brahmanas, the Lord became absorbed in ecstatic love. As the Lord looked at those lotus feet, tears flowed from his lotus eyes, his hair stood on end, and he began shivering. Lord Gaurachandra then began to manifest ecstatic devotional service for the benefit of the entire world. So this is a key. There's several stages in this transformation from being a super scholar to becoming a devotee. Was serving a devotee, serving Ishwar Puri, then respecting the Vaishnavas, taking the water from washing their feet, then seeing and hearing the glories of the lotus feet of the Lord. The transformation has begun. I'll read his purport. Sri Gaurasundara appeared in this world in order to bestow eternal benefit on the universe. So far, he had not manifested any sign of awarding loving devotion to the people of this world. But after seeing the lotus feet of the Lord at Gaya, he inaugurated his pastime of awarding loving devotion to the people of the world. Understanding that these lotus feet of the Lord had appeared in the material world to give pious persons who are free from the clutches of personalism an opportunity to serve the Lord's lotus feet, the Lord became overwhelmed with the 8 transformations of ecstatic love. Being bereft of Krishna's service, persons who are averse to Krishna in this world maintain the sinful desire of becoming the Lord or the enjoyer of the material world. After destroying the conditioned soul's desire for material enjoyment or liberation, when the lotus feet of the Lord appear in the purified hearts of the living entities, then their propensity for serving the Lord is awakened. In order to exhibit and preach this great truth, the Lord accepted the dress of a devotee and had darshan of the transcendental lotus feet of Gadadhar through his service inclined senses. When the living entities, bound by gross and subtle chains, wander throughout the material sky, they remain averse to the service of the Lord, but when their service propensity is awakened on the strength of the mercy received from Hari, Guru, and Vaishnava, then the lotus feet of the worshipable Lord Vishnu become the object of those servants' awakened spiritual propensity. Without a service mentality, one cannot become fortunate enough to see the form of the Lord. Without the piety resulting from devotional service, one's faith is not awakened. On the strength of piety born of the devotee's mercy, a living entity receives the opportunity to hear topics of Lord Hari. Sometimes, on the strength of piety born from Krishna's mercy, a living entity becomes free from the bondage of material sense objects and thus encounters the worshipable Lord Krishna. This is spiritual vision. When, after full surrender, a living entity hears and glorifies topics of Lord Krishna, the propensity of his consciousness is constantly engaged in the service of Krishna. This is the result of piety born of a devotee's mercy. I mean, just reading this, it so much resembles Prabhupada's writing. It's like reading a Bhaktivedanta purport, but it's Bhaktisiddhanta, which says, what a strict follower Prabhupada was of Bhaktisiddhanta. Not only the message hasn't changed, but even the mood and some of the language, etc. Prabhupada was such a careful follower. Okay, carrying on. Text 45. The Brahmanas were all startled to see tears flow from the Lord's eyes, like the unbroken flow of the Ganges. By the this is the 50th year anniversary for Radha Govinda, their appearance in New York, and there's different opportunities of devotees who were there during the appearance of Radha Govinda in New York, and there's the whole description. There's a video, a YouTube video of it. And 3 devotees spoke their direct experience, and one spoke of another devotee's experience of Prabhupada's spontaneous symptoms. One of them was one of Prabhupada's disciples. His name is Varanasi. She's very devoted to Radha Govinda, made clothing for Radha Govinda, etc., etc., etc. Very devoted servant. When one time Prabhupada got to the temple before others got to the temple, when he was coming from the airport, and he went straight to the altar where Radha Govinda were and paid his obeisances. And Varanasi said, after Prabhupada left the room, she saw when he was paying obeisances, there was a puddle of water on the floor. It was just his ecstatic love, just seeing the deity. He didn't make any big deal about it, but Varanasi did. Varanasi said, she gathered it up and placed it all over her body and was jumping up and down, and so she understood what had happened. No, she wasn't on this call. She had some other commitment. It was like a Zoom call. 2 other devotees said, and another time, Prabhupada coming into the temple room, they were seated on the other side of the room from where the deities were, or where Prabhupada was paying obeisances, and tears went gushing from his eyes like syringe. So there's the tears that go like this, and there's the tears that go like that. And the water splashed and bounced and hit them on the other side of the room. That it wasn't, the temple room was kind of rectangular, narrow, but he wasn't letting it be known. He wasn't advertising himself in that way. But even just seeing the deity form, we see the deity form, and it's not a symptom of ecstasy. So he was on that platform of Krishna consciousness while speaking in the ways that he was speaking, sometimes very strongly, sometimes, but very powerful speaking. lifting and cleansing by his speaking. But he was experiencing ecstatic symptoms, sometimes outwardly, sometimes not. But that was some exchange that I just heard today of this YouTube recording. And these are people that I grew up with, as a devotee. Now they're senior citizens. They don't look the same as when they were younger. But they were aware while doing their services that the person who they're serving is this ecstatic devotee. So when you hear descriptions of people hearing from Prabhupada and the transformations that took place, I think it just helps to hear some of these descriptions, as has happened here. By the divine will of the Supreme Lord, at that moment, Sri Ishwar Puri arrived at that place. On seeing Ishwar Puri, Sri Gadadhar respectfully offered him obeisances. Ishwar Puri was also delighted to see Goras Chandra, and he happily embraced him. Because I just heard this today, I'll add another little story. Some of you know who Brahma Tirtha is, formerly Bob Cohen. He's the Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, Bob Cohen. When he first met Srila Prabhupada in that Perfect Questions, Perfect Answers, when, if I remember correctly, he was a Peace Corps volunteer. He was married. His wife was with him when Barbara Cohen met Prabhupada, and so those questions and answers. Later, as a married couple, they were living in New Jersey, and he had the opportunity for driving Prabhupada, in part because our temples at that time, we didn't have proper cars. The cars we had were used police cars, because you could buy them at auctions and they were cheap. But they weren't really suited for driving Prabhupada. But he, then Bob Cohen, had an uncle who had a Cadillac or something, a Lincoln Continental or some nice car. So he borrowed his uncle's car, and he was Prabhupada's driver. And he describes what some of those exchanges were. And in one of those exchanges, he realized that he should be paying obeisances, but he was sitting in the car, and Prabhupada was coming out of the temple down the steps, and what to do, and while he was processing what to do, by that time Prabhupada came and got in the car. I mean, somebody let him in, and he got in the car. So Bob Cohen at that time wanted to pay his obeisances, but he's behind the driver's wheel. So he tried to put his head below the driver's wheel. And Prabhupada smiled and patted him. That's all right, let's go. Then Prabhupada was in his quarters at the Brooklyn Temple, the Henry Street Temple, and the system was, there was, when Prabhupada walked through the hallways, it was a double brownstone building. Prabhupada's quarters was on that side, that mirrored where the temple was on this side. In the back of the temple side was the altar, and then over there the pujari room. And in Prabhupada's quarters on the back side was where his sitting room, where he met with devotees and where he would sit and do his work, his translation work. So he was coming from his quarters to come into the temple, and it was known that he was coming because the sannyasis with all their dandas were coming ahead of him. Prabhupada is coming with his entourage. So Brahmatirtha described he was feeling very badly because the devotees at that time were telling him, "You're not initiated yet? What's wrong with you? You're not initiated yet? Something's wrong with you. What's wrong with you? And your wife, she's even worse than you." And he said he was starting to actually feel there must be something wrong with me. He heard it so many times. And, devotees were a little uncultured and a little zealous. So he said, I'm feeling that way. I paid my obeisances a little bit away so I wouldn't get in anybody's way. And I said my obeisances loudly and very slowly, thinking that by the time I completed, Prabhupada would have passed and he would be in the temple room and he wouldn't have to see me because he was feeling lowly. So he paid his obeisances when he saw the dandas coming, and very slowly, and he didn't even notice that right by his feet were Prabhupada's feet, because he had stopped. He recognized and stopped. And when Brahmatirtha stood up, he was thinking, oh no, now he's going to see how lowly and fallen I am. And Prabhupada embraced him very warmly. And he said, that's the best embrace I've ever had in my whole life. One can only imagine what that must have been like for him. And it's obviously still with him as an impression. And here's Ishwara Puri embracing Mahaprabhu. Now, Ishwara Puri is not, he's a realized soul. He's going to accept the personality of Godhead as his disciple. He knows it's a pastime, and he's embracing him as if he's a subordinate because he's younger and so forth. But it's ecstatic. It's very ecstatic. To be embraced by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Have anything just to see him, but what to speak of his embrace. In the ecstasy of meeting each other, they both became soaked with tears of love. The Lord said, my journey to Gaya has become successful the moment I was able to see your lotus feet. Another long purport. If one offers oblations to the forefathers in a holy place, then the forefathers are delivered. But one delivers only he to whom the oblation was offered. By seeing you, however, millions of forefathers are immediately freed from material bondage. Therefore, holy places are not equal to you, for you purify even the holy places. Please deliver me from the ocean of material existence. I surrender myself unto you. This is Nimai Pandit to Ishwara Puri. I beg that you make me drink the nectar of Krishna's lotus feet. Again, remember, he's written this book about Krishna's pastimes. He's well acquainted with Krishna's lotus feet. Ishwara Puri said, listen, dear Pandit, I know without doubt that you are an expansion of the Supreme Lord. Can anyone other than an expansion of the Supreme Lord possess the extraordinary learning and characteristic that you have? I had an auspicious dream last night, and today I've obtained the fruit of that dream. O Pandit, I'm telling you the truth. I'm feeling great ecstasy every moment since I've seen you. From the time I saw you in Nadia, my heart has had no other attraction. I'm speaking the truth, nothing else. When I see you, I feel the happiness of seeing Krishna. Hearing his beloved Ishwara Puri's truthful words, the Lord smiled and said, It is my great fortune. In this way, the two exchanged many other pleasing words, which will be described in the future by Vyasadeva, by Veda Vyas. The Lord then took leave of Ishwara Puri and went to offer his oblations to his forefathers. The Lord went to the Palgu River and offered oblations to the forefathers with sand. He then went to Preta Gaya on top of the hill. Sri Sachinandana offered Shraddha at that place and then satisfied the Brahmanas with sweet words. After duly delivering the forefathers, the Lord happily went to Dakshina Manasa. He next went to Shira Rama Gaya, where he had previously performed Shraddha in his incarnation as Ramachandra. In this incarnation, he again performed Shraddha at that place. Thereafter, Lord Gaurahari went to Yudhishthir Gaya. Maharaj Yudhishthir had previously performed Shraddha there. Out of affection for Yudhishthir, Gaura also performed Shraddha there. All the Brahmanas there sat around the Lord and directed him in the procedures of the Shraddha ceremony. As the Lord performed Shraddha and offered oblations in the water, all the resident Brahmanas grabbed the offerings and ate them. Sri Sachinandana smiled on seeing this, and thus the Brahmanas were freed from all material bondage. The Lord next offered Shraddha at Uttara Manasa. He then went to Bhima Gaya. Thereafter, the Lord performed the prescribed rites at Shiva Gaya, Brahma Gaya, and finally Sodasha Gaya. While at Sodasha Gaya, the Lord faithfully offered Shraddha with 16 ingredients on behalf of all his forefathers. Thereafter, the Lord took bath at the Brahmakund and offered oblations at Gaya Shira. The Lord then personally worshipped Lord Vishnu's footprints with flower garlands and sandalwood paste. After completing his offerings of Shraddha and satisfying the Brahmanas at all the recommended places, the Lord returned to his room. Now it's said in the commentaries here, to do all of what we just read, it normally takes several days, and did it all in one day. It's not just he ran from place to place, he was just able to do things that most people can't do. After he took some rest, the Lord then sat down to cook. As soon as the Lord finished cooking, Sri Ishwara Puri arrived there. Ishwara Puri's head was rolling back and forth in ecstatic love as he arrived there, chanting the names of Krishna. The Lord immediately left the kitchen, and after respectfully offering obeisances, he seated Ishwara Puri comfortably. Ishwara Puri smiled and said, "Listen, O Pandit, I see I've come at the right time." The Lord replied, "It is my good fortune if you accept your meal here today." Ishwara Puri smiled and said, "Then what will you eat?" The Lord replied, "I will cook again." Ishwara Puri then said, "What is the need for cooking again? Divide whatever you have in 2 portions." The Lord smiled and said, "If you really want to please me, then eat whatever I've cooked. I'll cook again within a moment. You take your meal without hesitation." The Lord then gave his meal to Ishwara Puri and happily went to cook for himself. Ishwara Puri's mind never deviated from the lotus feet of Krishna. Therefore, the Lord bestowed such mercy on him. The Lord served Ishwara Puri with his own hands, and Ishwara Puri thus ate in great ecstasy. At that time, Rama Devi, the goddess of fortune, quickly cooked food for the Lord, while remaining unseen by all. Then, after the Lord first fed Ishwara Puri, he happily ate himself. One who hears about the Lord's taking his meal with Ishwara Puri will achieve the wealth of love of Krishna. I hope you're ready. The Lord, with his own hands, then smeared sandalwood paste on the body of Ishwara Puri. Who has the ability to describe the Lord's love for Sri Ishwara Puri? The Supreme Lord Sri Chaitanya personally visited the birthplace of Ishwara Puri. The Lord said, I offer my obeisances to the village of Kumarahata, where Sri Ishwara Puri appeared. Lord Chaitanya cried profusely at that place and spoke nothing other than the name of Ishwara Puri. The Lord took some dust from the birthplace of Ishwara Puri and tied it in his cloth. The Lord said, the dust from the birthplace of Ishwara Puri is my life, wealth, and living force. The Lord exhibited such affection for Ishwara Puri because he takes pleasure in increasing the glories of his devotees. The Lord said, I came to Gaya to offer oblations to my forefathers. Now that I have seen Ishwara Puri, my journey has become successful. On another day, the Lord went privately to Ishwara Puri and in sweet words requested him for initiation, mantra diksha. Ishwara Puri replied, what to speak of mantra? I can give my life to you. Then, in order to instruct everyone, the Lord accepted the 10-syllable mantra from Ishwara Puri. I'll read this short purport. Sri Gaurasundara is directly Sri Krishna. In the first verse of Lila Sukha Bilvamangala's Sri Krishna Karnamrita it is said, Shiksha Gurush Cha Bhagavan Shiksha Pincha Mali. All glories to my instructing spiritual master, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who wears peacock feathers in his crown. Though situated in the heart of Ishwara Puripad, as Chaitya Guru Supersoul, in order to instruct everyone that it is essential for a person desiring to attain the goal of life to first take shelter at the lotus feet of the spiritual master, Mahaprabhu personally accepted Puripad as his guru and enacted the pastime of receiving the 10-syllable mantra from him. The Lord then circumambulated Ishwara Puri and said, I fully surrender myself unto you. Please glance mercifully on me so that I may float in the ocean of love of Krishna. Hearing the Lord's words, Ishwara Puri embraced him. The bodies of both became soaked with their tears and agitated due to ecstatic love. In this way, while bestowing mercy on Ishwara Puri, Sri Gaurahari remained in Gaya for a few days. At that time, as the time became ripe for the Lord to reveal himself, his loving devotional sentiments increased day by day. One day, the Lord sat down in a solitary place and began to meditate on his 10-syllable mantra. After some time, when the Lord regained his external consciousness, he began to shed tears and call for Krishna. And there's a long explanation of what dhyan means, the meditation on mantra. Oh, my dear Krishna, oh Father Hari, my life and soul, where did you go after stealing my heart? I saw my Lord, but now, where has he gone? The Lord then began to cry and recited various verses. And Bhakti Siddhanta makes reference to chapter 30 of the 10th canto, the Gopi Gita section, where the gopis are expressing love and separation. That is to say, what Lord Chaitanya was experiencing was the mood of the gopis in their love and separation. that love which he had, of course, it's his lila, so he doesn't need to receive it from anyone. But Madhavendra Puri is the one who manifested that quality, characteristic of love and separation in the mood of the gopis, passed that on to Ishwara Puri. Ishwara Puri, in lila-wise at least, passed that on to Mahaprabhu. So it's now the mood, and of course even the section of Chaitanya Bhagavat is changing from the wrangling, puffed up, arrogant, scholarly, youthful pastime to the devotee pastime. And right away, love in the mood of the gopis and separation from Krishna. And it grows and grows and grows. The Lord was absorbed in sentiments of ecstatic love, and his entire body was covered with dust. He loudly cried out in distress, "Where did you go, leaving me behind, my dear child Krishna?" Because that's parental affection. The Lord, who was previously most grave, now became greatly agitated in ecstatic love. He rolled on the ground, cried loudly, floated in the ocean of devotional feelings of separation. Then, after some time, Nimai's students came and pacified him with great care. The Lord said to them, "You will go back to Navadvip. I will not return to material life. I must go see Mathura, where I'll see the Lord of my life, Sri Krishna Chandra." The students tried in various ways to solace the Lord and keep him peaceful. The Lord of Vaikuntha, however, was absorbed in devotional sentiments, and his heart was agitated, so how could he remain peaceful? Early one morning, without informing anyone, the Lord departed from Mathura in ecstatic love. As Lord Gora walked, he called out, "Oh, Krishna, my dear child, where can I find you?" After traveling a while, the Lord heard a voice from the sky. What's the voice from the sky? Doesn't say or the voice in the sky, but elsewhere it's the demigods reminding him. "Oh, crest jewel of the Brahmanas, don't go to Mathura now. You will go when the appropriate time comes. Now you should return to your house in Navadvip. You are the Lord of Vaikuntha, and you have appeared along with your associates to deliver the people of the world. When you distribute the wealth of ecstatic love, your kirtan will inundate innumerable universes. You have advented to distribute that love, which Lord Ananta always glorifies, and which Brahma, Shiva, and the four Kumaras are overwhelmed with. This fact is known to you. We are your servants, therefore we offer this reminder at your lotus feet. O Lord, you are supremely independent. Whatever you desire cannot be checked by anyone. Therefore, O Lord, please return home. You will see the city of Mathura later." After hearing the voice from the sky, Sri Gaurasundar was satisfied and stopped his journey. The Lord returned to his room in Gaya and then took his students back to Navadvip, where he revealed the devotional service of Krishna. After Lord Gaurachandra arrived in Navadvip, his loving sentiments began to increase day by day. The topics of Adikanda are thus completed. Please hear now the topics of Madhyakanda. One who hears about the Lord's visit to Gaya will see Lord Gaurasundara in his heart. One who hears glorification of Krishna directly associates with Krishna and is never separated from him. Lord Nityananda has inspired me from within my heart to describe some of Lord Chaitanya's pastimes in this book. Only by his mercy am I able to write these narrations concerning Lord Chaitanya, for I have no independence whatsoever. Whatever I describe is only by the direction of Gaurachandra, just as a puppet dances only by the direction of the puppeteer. There is no beginning or end to the topics of Lord Chaitanya, yet somehow or other I am trying to glorify him. As there is no end to the vast sky, a bird only flies as high as it is able. This is a celebrated statement. Each of us, what can we say? A devotee recently, because it was Gaur Purnima, he was requested to speak something in the morning class on Gaur Purnima morning. And he was like, so I just referred him to this verse. A bird can only fly so high as he is given the ability by the Supreme Lord. So fly as high as so he's saying, what can we do? We're so insignificant, and the limits of the Lord's greatness are without limit. What can we do? A bird only flies as far as it is able. As there is no end to the vast sky, a bird flies as far as it is able. In a similar way, there's no end to the glories of Lord Chaitanya, so a person can glorify him only as far as he is empowered. As the birds fly in the sky as far as their capacity allows, so learned devotees describe the Lord as far as their realization allows. I offer my respectful obeisances unto the feet of all the Vaishnavas, so that they may not consider my offenses. Anyone who wants to cross the material ocean and merge into the ocean of devotional service must worship the lotus feet of Lord Nityananda. Since Sri Gaura Sundara is the Lord of my Lord, I constantly hope that he will bestow mercy on me. Someone says, Nityananda Prabhu is Balaram. And another says, he is the most beloved devotee of Lord Chaitanya. Someone else says, he is a powerful personality. And another says, we don't understand who he is. Someone may consider Nityananda a sannyasi. Someone may consider him a devotee. Someone may consider him a jnani. They may say whatever they may like. Even if Nityananda is a most insignificant servant of Lord Chaitanya, I would still keep his lotus feet in my heart. I therefore kick the head of any sinful person who disregards the glories of Lord Nityananda and dares to criticize him. All glories to Lord Nityananda, whose life and soul is Lord Chaitanya. Let me take shelter at your lotus feet as your servant. Let me sing the glories of Lord Chaitanya, and let me accompany you birth after birth. One who hears the topics of Lord Chaitanya described in Adikanda will certainly attain his lotus feet. After taking leave of Ishwarapuri, Lord Gauranga returned home. Everyone in Navadvip was happy to hear of the Lord's arrival. They felt as if their life air had returned to their body. Accepting Sri Chaitanya and Nityananda Prabhu as my life and soul, I, Vrindavan Das, sing the glories of their lotus feet. Now, his pastimes as a devotee they're sweet, and they're profound, and they're very deep, like the ocean. Only an ocean that doesn't have a bottom. Even the ocean has a bottom. And the ocean-like pastimes of Lord Chaitanya are fathomless. When this morning I had some one-on-one discussions with devotees from Singapore, with a Zoom call. And some of them were saying some things that resembled me. Like, I grew up such and such. And it's not, it's not the traditional such and such, it's some of whatever is there in Southeast Asia, such and such. And there were 3 different persons that had that same story. Now, I have this affinity for such and such, but I also have this affinity for Krishna Bhakti. So, what do I do? What should I do? Now, the affinity for such and such doesn't mean you have to give it a bad name and throw it in the garbage can or something like that. Whatever it is that has been of benefit for you before this stage of life, the Krishna Bhakti stage of life, it's something that you can hold as very valuable. It has helped you to become a good person, or a devoted person, or whatever person, whatever good qualities are there. It's helped you. And then to continue that same something. So it's a little bit like hearing about Lord Chaitanya, which my thought is, which one of us here in this room have heard of Lord Chaitanya before we became involved in Krishna consciousness? Probably hardly anybody. Maybe you because of being born in Bengal. But, the rest of us, it's all new. And even people born in Bengal, they probably have all kinds of different ideas of Lord Chaitanya. And because followers of Lord Chaitanya weren't properly, many of them became deviated. Because they weren't founded in the teachings. Without going into it, they weren't founded properly in the teachings. Therefore, the Chaitanya Charitamrita had a very special place in amongst all, because Lord Chaitanya's presence was profound, and it sent people in different directions that didn't have a proper understanding of the Siddhanta. The writing of Chaitanya Charitamrita was so authoritative, so comprehensive, so complete, that the teachings of Lord Chaitanya became very clear, and the deviated sampradayas didn't have wiggle room anymore. I mean, there were all kinds of things. Not understanding the position without, too many details. Some persons, we read in Chaitanya Charitamrita, for example, that Krishnadas Kaviraj said that Advaitacharya had several sons. Several of them were useless. He doesn't even mention their name. Just, they're useless. But those useless ones, they accepted Advaitacharya as the personality of Godhead and didn't have a proper understanding of Lord Chaitanya. So Krishnadas Kaviraj's writings was so comprehensive and complete, it set the record straight. And here's another example I learned from Krishna Kshetra Swami. Some group over here, they knew of Ramananda Roy's activities as training Devi Dasis for how to perform Krishna Lila. They didn't know the whole picture, they knew that part. And then, so they were doing those things as followers of Lord Chaitanya. And it brought a bad name, because they didn't understand Ramananda Roy. They didn't understand Lord Chaitanya. They didn't understand the big picture. They were just imitating this and imitating that, and different deviations. And it's not there in Chaitanya Bhagavat. It did become established in Chaitanya Charitamrita, the Siddhanta. And, with many, many, many voluminous scriptural references to support the proper orientation of bhakti towards the original personality of Godhead, and why it is that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is the original personality of Godhead, not Advaita Acharya, and not Nityananda. And then, this misunderstanding of Nityananda being an avaduta by conduct. Anyway, it's described so nicely in Chaitanya Charitamrita. But here in Chaitanya Bhagavat, we're getting descriptions of pastimes that, because they were chronologically written by Vrindavan Das, they weren't covered in Chaitanya Charitamrita, out of respect to the previous great author, Vrindavan Das. Krishna Das Kaviraj didn't repeat. He makes a one-line or half of a line statement about something that's elaborated upon in Chaitanya Bhagavat. So we're reading Chaitanya Bhagavat to get some of those details. But to properly understand Chaitanya Bhagavat, we need Chaitanya Charitamrita, because it's the frame of understanding the tattva properly. And then the pastimes can be relished properly, or more completely. But the style of Vrindavan Das, he makes no attempt to explain to his reader the tattva of Gora Tattva. He just says it. And you follow the style. He makes a statement, and he goes on for 10, 15, 20 verses, expanding in a jubilant way on that particular mood, and then comes back to the theme of the pastime. He's just this ecstatic devotee, and waves of ecstasy are waving in his heart, and he just expresses himself freely and openly. And he's narrating the pastimes because he has all faith that just by hearing the pastimes one will become cleansed. He writes, we read, Vrindavan Das was not present during Gaura Lila and the exchanges between Lord Chaitanya and his loving associates. He wasn't there. So he's feeling sad. I wasn't able to see all these wonderful pastimes. But by hearing these pastimes and describing these pastimes, I'm getting the same benefit. It's the same and it's not the same. It's the same and it's not the same. These associates that were with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and participated in his pastimes with him, how fortunate. How fortunate. That's like there was some discussion, his students. And what austerity, who were they? How did they become so fortunate? They became students of Nimai Pandit and watched him go through all these ecstatic transformations of receiving the 10-syllable mantra and going completely, in a different direction in his life, like overnight. And then trying to pacify him, etc., etc., etc. What good fortune. So we don't have the good fortune. One thing we have the good fortune of is it happened only 500 years ago. Now what about all the other yugas that pass when it's not known at all? So we have lots of good fortune. And the 6 Goswamis who followed him and their writings and their followers and our great Acharya, Srila Prabhupada, and how fortunate are we? And we're struggling, but how fortunate are we? And getting Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur's commentaries to explain these. I'm just reading the verses, and hopefully it will encourage you, at least at some point in time, to go through the whole thing, and including Bhaktisiddhanta's commentaries, because it brings to light what Vrindavan Das has not done. What Vrindavan Das Thakur has not done is he didn't give all the tattva, the Gora tattva. He just glorifying his pastimes. He's fulfilling his purpose. And the commentators are assisting us to get the tattva correct. Very purifying, very purifying, very elevating. But and how relatable it back to the launching point of this comment after reading. It's all new to us. So how do you develop love for someone that you don't know yet? Is by hearing about them and getting to understand, serving them and serving those dear to them, serving those who are attached to them. Then you come to know about the somebody. But Krishna himself, in the mood of his devotee and how he became a devotee in his Leela. It's all very wonderful. Lots and lots of mystery. Okay, so let's see if there's some discussion. You're on.
So you'd said, Hare Krishna. So you'd said that Nimbarkacharya was the leader of one of the other sampradayas. So which sampradaya was that exactly?
The Kumara Sampradaya.
What do they teach?
What was that?
What do they teach? Like, what are their teachings? And
Where did he live? South India. It teaches, the four sampradayas are all Vaishnava teachings. And there's a strong emphasis, 2 points I mentioned. There's strong emphasis in the Nimbarka Sampradaya. One, the exalted position of Radharani. 2, the most exalted role of the love of the gopis, so amongst the rasas. So they have some knowledge of rasa, not as elaborately described as that Rupa Goswami described, hearing it from Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but they have an understanding of the exalted position of Madhurya Rasa and the unique position of Radharani. And when it's very common when we go to Vrindavan during Kartik month, they have their yatras too. They go and in large groups and visit the places of Vrindavan, and one of their favorite places is Varsana, because they have great respect for Radharani, this unique position of Radharani. So they're Vaishnavas, as we are, and they have strong emphasis on those 2 things. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. The Lord doing the Shraddha ceremony in Gaya has a greater significance. I'm just trying to frame my questions, so kindly bear with me. So, what is that in my stage of a practice, and especially with the Shraddha ceremony for my fathers and my forefathers, that I can take by hearing that Lord performing Shraddha ceremony in multiple places?
Practical application for you is your question?
Yes.
I'm trying. My pause is I'm trying to think if there was, or if there was not, any emphasis that Srila Prabhupada or Bhaktisiddhanta gave to observing that particular vrata of Shraddha for one's forefathers in Gaya. And I'm drawing a blank. There are, I pursued this question with our deity worship ministry. Now, there are procedures in Hari Bhakti Vilas. It's not a common practice in Gaudiya Vaishnavism that I'm aware of. Because when I've asked, a go-to person for all kinds of Hari Bhakti Vilas details is Gaura Keshava. He knows, he's given me a copy of Hari Bhakti Vilas, his translation of Hari Bhakti Vilas. And he knows some of those details. And some persons, it's a little bit like when you do deity worship. When you do deity worship, there's the home standard, minimum standard, there's a temple standard, higher standard, and then you can go further and further and further. And, more items to your daily puja and mantras to recite, and further and further and further. There's similarly with initiation, there's a very simple procedure which Prabhupada followed. And then there's more elaborate procedure, and there's very, very elaborate procedure in Gopal Bhatta's writings. It can take several hours just for that particular event. So similarly, within ISKCON in practice, I'm unable. I've checked without naming the names. I checked with 5 different authorities that are very familiar with deity worship standards. How should a family who just had some decease happen, or sometime after some decease happened, what's the procedure they should follow if they want to do it nicely? No mention of Gaya, and there's very little that comes back. In honor of that departed person, you offer Vishnu Prasad, so it doesn't need going to Gaya, and then feed the devotees, Vaishnav Seva. Is it recommended, if one has the capacity and the desire, and et cetera, to do the whole thing? Sure. But the essence is, it's just like chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. One can do other things and other things and other things. Some people like the other things and other things, and puja can go on for many hours each day. Or it can be quite simple, and the essence is within the essence. You follow my answer?
Yes, ma'am.
So if for someone who is very interested, they can get a copy of, it's hard to get a good copy, get a copy of Hari Bhakti Vilas. I imagine it's more available in Hindi, certainly it's available in Sanskrit, and study that section and do what it says. And then it'll keep you busy for some time, doing each thing elaborately. And otherwise, the essence is the essence, and everything is within the essence. And you do all the other things without the essence, without the real submission, and you're missing the point.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Amara Mataji's question. I have an understanding that when one is absorbed deeply in Lord's thoughts, he does not have external considerations. What is the difference of absorption when one writer writes spontaneously in ecstatic mood, another carefully considers to explain the tattva, perhaps for helping the readers understand the Lord better? Is it that a spontaneous one is more deeply absorbed, or is it just their moods, but they're equally absorbed?
The last answer. There's variegatedness in everything, in the material as well as the spiritual. And it's not to say that Krishnadas Kaviraj was more absorbed, or Vrindavan Das was more absorbed, the other one was less absorbed. Their nature and the purpose and spirit of their writing, because they're both writers, was for elevation and edification. The gift that Krishnadas Kaviraj was given was superlative, evidenced by the fact that within it, he's bringing together all the disparate parts of the followers of Lord Chaitanya. Of course, he was living some generation or two after Vrindavan Das, but bringing, separated parts of Lord Chaitanya's followers together. And for future generations, establishing truths about Lord Chaitanya that would help persons that aren't familiar with Lord Chaitanya become more understanding and accepting. So, the answer to her question is, there's not one's better than the other. Both have their place. They were inspired exactly as he says. He's inspired by Lord Nityananda. And so it was. There was a purpose.
Amara Mataji's question 2 days ago that we couldn't read. Was there an internal or a deeper reason of Lord taking sannyas apart from the scholars blaspheming him? He definitely thought of their welfare, but they can't make the Lord do anything here. So I was seeking clarification.
The question's clear. And there's multiple. There's external and there's internal reasons for the Lord's appearance, and it facilitated both. The order of sannyas facilitated persons who can't see transcendence be respectful of one who is in the renounced order, which was part of the external. As a sannyasi, those who might be inclined to disrespect would by culture respect. At least during his time, that was the case. So it facilitated the external reason, the propagating of the Sankirtan movement, and it facilitated the internal mood as well. And it facilitated Vishnu Priya to experience the same thing that the gopis felt in separation from Krishna. It had many purposes. it facilitated him teaching his followers the principle of detachment. As Sarvabhauma Bhattacharya wrote, who was a super scholar, in glorification of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Vairagya Vidya Nitya Bhakti Yoga, Shikshartam Ekam Purushak Puranam. So Vairagya Vidya Nija Bhakti Yoga. He was teaching Nija Bhakti Yoga unto himself in the mode of Vairagya and Vidya. So both were there in his taking of sannyas. But it was teaching this unique position of devotion to himself as he was exhibiting the mood of the gopis. So it suited his internal purposes as well. Anything else in the room? That was an online question. You have something, yeah?
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj. My question is about when we hear the Falastuti, by hearing the pastimes from Bhagavatam or any, from what we read. So it depends on the receiver as well, the hearer, how much is, he or she is trying to get the message. Maybe can you please elaborate a little bit more on that, because it says that you will get so and so things, bhakti of the Lord, lotus. One will achieve the lotus feet of the Lord, but it also depends on the person who is hearing it.
Yeah. But you said it very nicely. Within such and such, it says you do such and such, and this is going to be the phala or the outcome. It means there's potency here, sufficient potency here for this outcome. But someone reading this may say, well, I just heard this and I'm not getting all of that phala. So it depends on the potency and the receiver of that potency. So what happens when one doesn't have the receiver on sufficiently? You continue to gradually purify and uplift so that by hearing the same thing later, there's another experience than earlier. It's not an exaggeration. There's sufficient potency there. I mean, your question also was resembling what I don't feel I did such a nice job explaining. Hearing about Lord Chaitanya and his glories, for someone that's not accustomed to hearing about Lord Chaitanya and his glories, it's a little abstract, because there's no love for the person yet. It's like a nice story, it's this nice story, but there isn't a feeling being stirred like there is when somebody has some affinity for Lord Chaitanya. So how does that affinity develop? It's like this discussion with people, just this morning. When I was young, we did such and such, our whole family, and that's still there with me, some feelings like this, and now it's Krishna Bhakti, so how do I navigate this? And that's Krishna Bhakti, that's far more prominent than Gaura Bhakti. But Gaura Bhakti has its ecstasy too. And if there are devotees, I'll share a detail. Some of you may know, you're playing drum on your foot, could you just hold off? Some of you may know Varsana Swami. Some of you are nodding yes, some of you don't know who he is. Prabhupada disciple who I knew from when he started visiting the New York temple as Bhakta Jack. And Bhakta Jack didn't belong in the city. He wanted to be in the country. So he moved to New Vrindavan. He became Prabhupada's disciple, Kashava. When he took sannyas, he became Varsana Swami. And he's been living like forever in New Vrindavan. And his service for longest time was just with the cows and with the agriculture and, building things. And he's a New Vrindavan Vasi. And he and Radhanath Maharaj both became deeply involved in Gaura Lila. He's written some books on Gaura Lila. So I asked him about that, that painting that's not from Chaitanya Charitamrita. It shows Lord Chaitanya in a boat with another student, and he's looking at a writing, and he's going to throw it in the river, and the other student is really sad. And I had heard that pastime somewhere, I couldn't remember, so I just asked him, because he's up to here in Gaura Lila. Well, he responded immediately. I thought the person's name, I got it wrong. He corrected me. His name was Raghunath. Raghunath was a colleague student of his, and he knew the whole Leela. Just like he's immersed, he's up to here. He has deep love. It's like, watch Badahari when he starts kirtan, and you just see this light all around him. He just glows. He just loves kirtan. So Varsana, he can be very sick, but he starts speaking about Lord Chaitanya, and he's like, he's luminous. He flows. He loves Lord Chaitanya. He has deep love for Lord Chaitanya. And he'll smile, and he'll become ecstatic. Even he's sick as a dog, because he loves Lord Chaitanya. So that the pastime was, Raghunath was writing a book on Nyaya. Mahaprabhu also had a book on Nyaya. And Raghunath wanted Lord Chaitanya, Nimai Pandit, to know, hey, I wrote a book. And there was two things. He didn't want Raghunath to be discouraged. So when he told him, I have a book on Nyaya, Nava Nyaya was the title of his book. So his other book, Lord Chaitanya threw it away. So his other book could become celebrated. And it was known as DPT Nyaya, something like that, of Raghunath. So that became a celebrated book during Lord Chaitanya's time, describing Nyaya. And Nyaya is a big deal for persons that are scholars. It's not conclusive, but for scholars, it's a big deal. And scholars use it. Prabhupada used it, although he didn't stand by, let's go to Nyaya school. He used it in service to Krishna. So, for years, Varsana Maharaj and also Radhanath Maharaj would just recite all these amazing Gaura Lila stories so joyfully, and because they had such love, have such love for Lord Chaitanya, it's contagious. You start to feel connected to the person by hearing the person. And when you hear from such a person, now back to your question, then it develops some affinity or receptivity towards the person, because it's like, look what it's doing to these two sannyasis. There must be something to it. By their own bhakti is passing on Gaura Bhakti. And it's that Gaura Bhakti that is going to help us get the fullness of Krishna Bhakti, or Braja Bhakti, through Lord Chaitanya and Lord Chaitanya's followers. So to get the fullness of the fruits that are being described, the Palastuti verses, It requires that. It has the power just to carry one. There's the stimulation for ecstatic love within those pastimes. And one may be a little dull and not be as stimulated as another person who's has attraction for the object of love. And love is exhibited in different ways. Now, I'm thinking of Amara's question. Love is exhibited in different ways. And how Vrindavan Das exhibited his love, and how Krishna Das exhibited his love, and how Lochan Das, who also wrote Chaitanya Mangala, and others that wrote biographies, they exhibit their love in different ways because they're different persons. Okay. Anything else? Okay. Thank you very much, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.